All right, we've told you about this all morning, and now what you're looking at right now is President Trump holding an arrival ceremony as he welcomes the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia to the White House. We expect to see cannons go off before a military flyover. So we're talking about a very elaborate welcome ceremony for the Crown Prince today. The two will then head inside the White House for an Oval Office meeting and apparently a lunch as well. Again, what you are seeing right now as we await that arrival is what looks like the honor guards standing out there, some of them holding flags as well. We also see what looks like White House officials on the left side of your screen there. Again, they are waiting for the arrival of the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, who will arrive at the White House shortly. He's going to hold a meeting with President Trump. President Trump has said this is all about investment, money, money, money. We're talking billions of dollars. And then there's also the possibility of selling F-35 fighter jets to Saudi Arabia, which was once an issue, but it appears this is not going to be an issue this time around because the president does seem poised to approve that sale. We're going to listen in right now to this welcome ceremony. Again, a very elaborate meeting between the two. Let's listen in.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States.
That was quite the welcome there. That was President Trump and the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, the president greeting him at the White House. I want to bring in CBS News Middle East reporter Courtney Kealy. Courtney, first, I just want to start with that ceremony because typically we talk about presidents of other nations visiting the White House, prime ministers, and they meet on a different entrance. This one, A completely different entrance this time around. You've got so many people standing outside. You've got the flyover. You've got military members out there. This was huge.
Quite the welcome. I mean, the pomp and the pageantry.
Yeah.
Now, we are talking about the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, and they do like this. If you remember the first trip President Trump made to Saudi Arabia in his first term, there was the orb and the dancing with swords. And then there was that momentous trip in the spring to Saudi Arabia. So now it's time for President Trump to host them in the way that the Saudi kingdom pretty much jives with President Trump. They like their gold, they like their gold mirrors, they like marble, and they like their pageantry. So beyond the pageantry, there's a lot of things to talk about, though, and a lot of things to come out of this visit. Now, there'll be a black tie dinner tonight, there'll be a meeting, but through all of this is the relationship between the U.S. and the Saudis. And right now, after that UN Security Council vote last night to approve the U.S.-backed Gaza plan, will the Saudis start reparations with the Israelis and somehow join the Abraham Accords? We know that President Trump wants that. We know that it's his end goal, but to get there is going to be really hard. And we have to recognize that Crown Prince Mohammed Salman does pretty much de facto rule, even though his father is still alive and very elderly. But it's the home of Medina and Mecca. This is the Muslim holiest sites are in Saudi Arabia. And they can't just betray the Muslim world by making peace with Israel until there's a pathway for the Palestinians. Now, will the UN Security Council sort of push that down the line because the U.S. can say this is a pathway? We're starting to get an international security force ready to go into Gaza? Or is this something where Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman will say, show us what you've got first, F-35s, nuclear enrichment, security like you just gave to Qatar? What's on the table is the big question.
Yeah, and there's also the question, too, Courtney, because I believe we heard this from Ed when he spoke to us earlier, this waiting to see whether or not there's going to be a recognition of a Palestinian state. That's also on the table before they officially agree to join the Abraham Accords, right?
Right. It's like a recognition or a pathway. Basically, you're at ground zero in Gaza. Everything's been destroyed. The cities have been leveled. They're living among rubble, and they need help in all ways. And they need intervention. And the U.S. didn't want to go in and look like they were going in like they did in previous years in Iraq and Afghanistan, or as sort of some proxy for the Israeli Defense Forces. So this is a way to get an international consortium, and Muslim and Arab states countries are on board with this. Saudi Arabia is leading the charge. Now, they probably would have joined the Abraham Accords if not for October 7th and the war in Gaza. They cannot speak to the domestic audience and immediately make peace right now without being able to show what they have and also say that they're still going to be the benefactors and supporters of the Palestinians and kind of right the wrongs that they see that have happened.
Yeah. And Courtney, let's talk about this because this is the first time the Crown Prince is visiting the White House since the killing of Washington Post journalist Jamal Khashoggi. So is this a sign that his murder and the human rights record under the Crown Prince are forgiven?
It really looks like that. I mean, what we just saw was certainly not a wrapping of anyone's knuckles or putting anyone on high alert for human rights abuses. Now, 7 years ago, it was a completely different story. There was international outrage of what happened at the Saudi embassy in Istanbul. Now, I was based there at the time, and the Turkish government was incensed and wanted the Saudis to be punished for this. It happened in their country. And now you're seeing Turkey really allying and working towards contracts in Syria and working with President Trump and then working with this whole group. I mean, Israel won't let Turkish troops go into Gaza, but they are going to be involved in the rebuilding. So things are really different. But at the time, There were security tapes. We really found out that, according to even the CIA, that Mohammed bin Salman had been complicit in the killing of Khashoggi. He was a critic of Mohammed bin Salman. He was a critic of the Saudi Arabia's involvement in Yemen in that war. He was a critic of what they were doing and interfering in Lebanon. I won't get into the weeds on that, but Saudi Arabia has always tried to have, that's a playing field that people do use Lebanon as a pawn for power.
Yeah.
And it's a complex, small country. So these were huge criticisms. 7 years ago, Khashoggi, grisly murder. I mean, there was an acid bath and bone saws involved, and I'll leave it at that because I don't want to really get into the grisly details, but it was shocking. His widow went to Congress and talked about this. They wanted to see justice prevail. And now, 7 years later, it's a very different geopolitical strategy and a very different Mohammed bin Salman, still young, coming in with reform in his country. It's very open now to foreign investment on every level, cultural, financial, cyber tech. And we're going to see how President Trump receives him, but he's receiving him with quite the stunning welcome, as we just spoke about.
He sure is. Courtney, Kealy, thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate your insight today.